So I would like to welcome everyone's favorite, if you've been around here for a while, our beautiful favorite, Reverend Joel Fotinos is going to be our speaker for the day. And welcome, Reverend Joel.
Can I just ask that we give everybody the opportunity to say good morning to each other before we start?
Absolutely.
The community greeting?
Oh, it was all melded in there. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't want anybody to miss out on this exciting
Yes.
part.
Everybody say hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Morning.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning.
Hi, Sally.
Morning, Rich.
Bart.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Carly.
Hi, Barbara.
Amy, good morning, and Barbara.
Barbara. Good morning, Sally.
Good morning,
Joe.
morning,
Good
Joel.
Michelle.
Hi.
morning, Paul.
Hello.
Beth, my
Paul.
daughter.
Hi.
Morning, Henry.
Hi,
Morning,
Beth.
Michelle.
Hey.
Morning, Kathy.
Good morning, Taylin.
Good morning.
Andy, Alyssa. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hi, hi, hi.
Morning, Tricia. Morning, Leah.
Good morning, Dave.
Everybody.
Morning, Barbara.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Ty.
Hi, Pat.
Good morning, Richard.
Hi,
Richard.
Priscilla.
Where's the bomb diggity today?
Yeah, where is he?
Good morning, Beth.
He's at
Here.
the beach.
Good morning.
Beth, you're the bomb diggity.
I guess I am. Shut up. No, I don't know how that happened.
That's funny.
All right.
Should I take it away?
Let me just see if I can. I don't know that I can mute everyone.
We can.
Let's see. Please, yeah. Oh, here we go. Well, if I mute all, I'm going to mute Joel. So everyone, please mute yourselves. And once again, let's welcome the wonderful Reverend Joel Fotinos.
What's better than being introduced once?
There
It's
you
being
go.
introduced twice. So to start with our joke, I'm doing a theme joke today, inspired by something my son said to me. We have this thing in our house. I can't remember who gave this to us, but somebody gave us this little toy thing. It's a little hand. And so often, and I mean often, probably at least once a week, I go up to my son Rafi and I'll say, "Do you need a little hand with anything?" And he always laughs and I always laugh. And he always says, "Dad, that's such a dad joke." And I always say, well, I'm a dad. So in the spirit of dad jokes, I have dad jokes. And they're all really bad dad jokes, but they make me laugh and I'm a dad, and hopefully they'll make you laugh too. There's a few of them. So the first one is, the secretary knocks on the door to the doctor's office, pops her head in and says, "Doctor, the invisible man has come. He says he has an appointment." And the doctor looks up and says, "Tell him I can't see him." Why aren't koalas actually bears? Because they don't meet all of the qualifications. All right, that's really bad. Why are green beans the most zen of all vegetables? Because they have found their inner peas. Evelyn's not sure about that one. She's shaking her head. That one was okay, this one is you have to think about this one. What do you call bears with no ears? B-E-A-R-S, ears. This one's also a slow sinker. What did the 0 say to the 8? Nice belt. I had to think about that one, by the way, when I read it, because it was like, oh, 0, 8. All right, got it. Nice belt. Which then, of course, it made me laugh like crazy. Just a few more. What do you call sad coffee? Depresso. What do you give a sick lemon? Lemonade. Lemonade. Why are pirates called pirates? Because they are. Ever tried eating a clock? It's really time consuming. 2 more. What sound does a nut make when it sneezes? Cashew. And finally, what did one hat say to the other hat? You wait here, I'll go on ahead. All right, dad jokes, part 1. Oh, I am probably going to read those jokes several more times today. And then when Alan and Rafi are around, I'm probably going to read them all to them again. That's how dad jokey I am. So today we are talking not about dad jokes. We are talking about we are talking about principles for successful living, which is another chapter as we go through the Science of Mind textbook this year. And this is a chapter that is in part 3 of the book, which is called Spiritual Mind Healing, 2nd Division Practice. So part 2 was about spiritual mind healing, what it is, and that's when we learned about treatment. And then in this part 3, the practice, it's how do we apply what we learned in part 2 to our lives. And of course, you can always go back to any of the previous talks. They're all available. The email that goes out every week has links to them. And you can always go and refresh, or if you've missed one, as we march through this book this year. And this has been a thrilling walk through the textbook. So we're on chapter 16. And if you have your copy of the textbook with you, you can follow along, because what we're going to do today is what I did a couple times ago. We're going to do an old-fashioned Science of Mind talk today, and I've got all my notes to go through the chapter very quickly, and then I'm going to sum up the chapter in what it means for us on the spiritual path. Because sometimes the language in this book, as we've talked about before, the language can be a little stilted or a little dated. And also I think different people who read this book come at it from a different points of view, of course. And I want to give you my point of view of what I think he's ultimately saying in this chapter. So let's just start with the first page of the chapter, which is page 266. And in the very first paragraph, he starts with what most people would put in the little fine print, if they put it in at all. When spiritual people write about successful stuff, they kind of want to put the good stuff up front and then the hard stuff at the end of the chapter, or with the little asterisk, where you go to the bottom of the page to read the little tiny fine print, and you're like, oh, okay. He puts it right up front. In fact, he puts it in the second sentence. He says, science of mind is not a get-rich-quick scheme. At which point, some people go, all right, on to the next thing. I'll pick up The Secret. And but he puts it right up front. He's honest. He is honest right up front with people. One thing, like books like The Secret, I heard, as somebody who has taught this kind of stuff for many years, I've heard so many people say, I read this book or that book or this book or that book, and they all promised a lot, but then nothing happened. It didn't deliver. And I heard that mostly about the Secret. A lot of people said that. And it's because those books don't talk about the things that he talks about in this chapter. It's really kindness to give you the fine print right up front. It's really smart and good for Ernest Holmes to say right up front, this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. And then he says, neither does it promise something for nothing. Neither does it promise something for nothing. We're going to get into that in a second. In paragraph 2, he says, we do not teach that you can get what you want. Now, again, another brave statement, because a lot of times people think that change your thinking, change your life means, hey, I can just get anything I want. Whatever the heck it is I want, I can just get it easily and effortlessly. And he says in black and white, first sentence, paragraph 2, we do not teach that you can get what you want. That's kind of, that's a bold statement. If we could get all we want, he goes on to clarify, it might be disastrous. For it is certain that most of us would want things that would interfere with the well-being of someone else. So again, right up front, Ernest Holmes is doing something interesting. He's acknowledging our humanness, the ego side of our human or humanity, the human, not the divine side of who we are or who we believe we are. And he's saying what you think you might want is probably not the thing that you really do want, ultimately. A Course in Miracles says that very clearly. The Course in Miracles says, you don't even know what you really want. And when we just think about that statement for a second and let that sink in, it feels true and right once we get past our ego. There was a country western song a number of years ago from Garth Brooks. Gosh, it might be a long time now, maybe back in the late 90s or early 2000s. And it was called Unanswered Prayers. And he says in that song, I thank God for unanswered prayers. And he goes on to talk about how if the things that he thought that he wanted, that he prayed for, had come true, then the great things that actually happened later would never have happened. And that's a beautiful way of thinking about this. And we grow and change. And so if we were to base what we want on the moment, we're missing kind of the larger picture of the spiritual journey. The next chapter, he said, next paragraph, he says this, he says, while we could not expect to demonstrate that which is contrary to the nature of our own experience, we not only believe, but we know that it is entirely possible through mental treatment, through right thought and belief, to greatly influence our environment and its reaction to us, the situations we meet and the conditions we contact. There is such thing as demonstrating a control of conditions. So this is how he's answering the questions that we might have from reading paragraphs 1 and 2 and say, wait a second, this is not get rich quick. This is, you're telling me I can't get anything I want because I don't know even what it is that I want. And what he's saying is relax for a second and realize this, that there is not every single thing that is within our control in our lives. So while we're not teaching that you can get everything that you want, we are teaching that you can influence your environment in such a way that the things that you want are more available to you, all right? Now, let me just give you kind of a bad example of this, or a light example, maybe is a better word of this. Yesterday, the last 3 days I was up in Cape Cod. I was doing I was at a monastery up in Cape Cod. And I was driving back yesterday. Now, I don't know how many of you have driven that road, the ride all the way to the very tip of Cape Cod, almost all the way to P-Town. It's a long drive, right? And I was trying to find a great way back so that I could avoid I-95 traffic, because I-95 is just filled with so much traffic and it's so frustrating to drive. But my GPS on my phone kept saying that's the fastest way. And I really was tired and I just wanted to get home. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna go home because my goal was to get home the fastest possible way. So I start driving and it's so wonderful now. I plugged in my phone into the car that I had rented, and on the screen, it has a little thing that shows the time that you're supposed to get home, you know, the estimated time that you would arrive there, how many minutes or hours and minutes until that time, and how many hours or miles are left. So I'm driving along and it says at one point when I started, it says, you are going to get home at 7:16 p.m. And I thought, that's great, that's fine. 7:16 works out just great. And as I'm driving, I notice that if I go the speed limit, it stays at 7:16 estimated arrival. if I go, forgive me, just a little bit more than the speed limit, I know none of you do that. I alone went just a little bit more over the speed limit. And I noticed as I did that, then my estimated arrival time went down. And then it was like, wow, that's cool. So now it's no longer 7:16, now it's 7:15. And if I stepped a little bit harder on the gas pedal, then it went down to 7:14 and 7:13. And I thought, this is a great game. I'm going to just keep doing this. And it just went down and down and down. That's me controlling my environment. Okay. I can control this. However, at a certain point, I noticed that even though I had put a heavy foot on the gas pedal, which, you know, I don't want to admit to outside of this little private room, the time started going back up again. I got down to like 7:08, then it started going back up to 7:09 and 10. And I thought, maybe I need to go even further. But the time kept getting later and later. And I thought, what's going on here? This is just crazy. At a certain point, thanks to wonderful technology, a little screen popped up on the thing and it said, there's an accident up ahead that is slowing down traffic. Now, I controlled everything I could control for the outcome that I wanted, but there were things up ahead I didn't know about that I could not control. I could not control an accident 50 miles down the road. Now, thanks to technology, it says there is a shorter route if you would like to take it, accept or decline, but accept. Then the time when I was already like down at 7:40 or something, it went way, way down. And the next thing I know, it was like 7:06. And I thought, this is great. This is awesome. So I keep going. And then my foot started playing the game again by pressing down, down, down. And I got way down. And then it did the same thing again and went back up. I couldn't control it. Thing comes up again. It says there's traffic delays or something. And we kept doing that until it finally found the right way to get me home. In my mind, I was thinking, I want this route to take me where I want it to go. But life, or in this metaphor, the GPS, was saying, that's not the way that's going to get you there fastest. But if you respond to the prompts that I give you, I can get you there quickly. Okay? So Ernest Holmes is saying that right here. We can influence our environment, its reaction to us, the situations we meet, and the conditions we contact. So while we can't control it, and we'd love to, we can listen to the prompts of spirit and control what we can, or do the things that we can. Page 267. One of the most important parts of this chapter. The science does not promise something for nothing. Now, for those of you who have taken my Think and Grow Rich class or have read Think and Grow Rich, that is one of the main points in this entire book of Think and Grow Rich. Interestingly enough, Think and Grow Rich came out a year before this version of The Science of Mind came out. And it's almost verbatim in this text what Napoleon Hill says in Think and Grow Rich. Did Napoleon Hill read Think and Grow Rich? I don't know, but it was a bestseller and there's a good chance he probably did. The science does not promise something for nothing. It does, however, tell us that if we comply with the law complies with us. What that means, what we cannot get something for nothing means is, what most of us want to do in life, and by most of us, I don't mean in this room, I mean in life, human nature, the default of human nature is that we want to do as little as possible to get as much as possible. Instead of somehow creating artwork that is worth $1 million, we'd rather just give $1 at a counter to get a ticket to win the $1 million. It's our nature, it's the default of the egoic human nature to want to get as much as possible for as little effort. The spiritual path, though, says that doesn't work. There has to be an energetic equivalent in what you want and what you give. You can't get this without giving in exchange something of equal or greater value. And what that means for us on the spiritual path is our realization, greater realization, our time, our effort, and change, being able to change who we are to grow. And I'm going to get into that. And that's the crux of this chapter. He says also at the top of 267, nope, in all capital letters. So I think he wants us to pay attention to this. No person whose entire time is spent in the contemplation of limitation can demonstrate freedom from such limitation. Worry, complaining, gossip, fear, panicking, those are all things that keep us from the very things that we want. I have a friend who I talk to, and the entire conversation seems to be about all the things that she wants, but all the reasons they can't happen. Do you guys know anybody like that? Some of you are shaking your head yes. And it becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy for ourselves. As we believe, so shall we will experience. And he goes on to say at the bottom of 267, he is unfolding from a limitless potential, but can bring into his experience only that which he can conceive. We are our own bottleneck. We are the ones that are keeping the flow from us. We can't control the entire thing, but boy, the things we can, we often keep our good at bay and not allow ourselves to open up so that we can receive the flow of life. Now, at the bottom of the page, he starts a sentence again, all in caps. So he's yelling it at us. He's saying, listen, if I had one of those, I don't even know what those things are called, you know, the goes out and he would be doing this. He says, man must become more if he wishes to draw a greater good into his life. Well, that is a concept for those of you who have read the book, The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. That's almost verbatim out of this book, which I think was originally published in, let me see, I think it's 1910. It doesn't say right here. I think it was like 1909, 1910, something like that, 1911. And there's no doubt in reading this chapter in The Science of Mind that Ernest Holmes had read Wallace Wattles' book, The Science of Getting Rich. There's so much that is similar in it. And that's one of the big things in it, which is we can't get more unless we become more. So we've talked about this in talks past, but it's so instructive and useful, that idea of people who don't work on their mental consciousness, for instance, in finances, and then win the lottery. We now know studies prove that most of those people not only lose their money that they win in the lottery, but they go deeper into debt than they were before they got the money. It's because in order to have more, we must become more. On the other hand, I've noticed, and I love reading about people who meet a circumstance in their life, and they meet that circumstance by growing before your very eyes. They become more because of the circumstances around them. And as they become more, it's like almost like they're lifted up and they become just bigger than they ever thought they would be. And that's what we're talking about here, is growing into something larger if you want to experience something larger. Ernest Holmes says on page 268, the law is a law of liberty, but not a law of license. It is exact and exacting, and unless we are willing to comply with its nature and work with it along the lines of its inherent being, we shall receive no great benefit. All caps, every person must pay the price for that which he or she receives, and that price is paid in mental and spiritual coin. That is the part where he's saying to us, for us to go ahead and become that greater person, we pay for the things that we want through our spiritual practice, through the very things that he's talked about in the first half of this book. Through all of the spiritual mind treatment and through all of those things we create, we put money into the spiritual bank so that when we need it, we can withdraw it and use it when it is that we most need to have it. At the bottom of that page, he says, true prayer must be, thy will be done. But the implication relative to the will of God in this prayer is not a submission to the inevitability of evil or limitation. It is a knowledge that the will of God is always good. Now, that's a brilliant paragraph to include in this chapter because of what we talked about. I think it was last time I spoke or the time before, that we are brought up in such a dualistic mindset that there is a God out there that we must petition for the things that we want. And then we have this little out. We can say, God, I really want this. I want my bills paid, but thy will be done. Meaning, well, if I don't get it, then I know that's, the person out there that I'm hoping and praying for, maybe they have another plan, or maybe it's just not in the cards for me, or something like that. But what Ernest Holmes is saying is, no, when you move from dualistic thinking to oneness, that there is only good in this universe, there is only this one power and presence that's good. Then when we say thy will be done, we're not talking about a thy out there. We're talking about connecting to that highest and greatest within us. So that when we say thy will, we're saying my will, my highest will be done, because the oneness is always good. So whatever it is that I want, thy will be done. It is good. It is good. Remember the line in the Bible that says, you meant this for evil, but God meant this for good? That means thy will be done means I'm lifting myself up. I'm lifting my consciousness up so high that I can see that everything can be good if I choose to see it rightly. Thy will be done means God is good all the time. On the next page, 269, he says, a mental avenue must be provided through which the law may operate as a law of liberty if we are to be free. This does not mean we must please the law, for it is impersonal and neither knows who cares or uses it or for what purpose. It's impersonal. It's mental avenue means that what he's saying with that is the mental avenue he refers to means we are using the law correctly. We're not defaulting in the old way of trying to please something or someone out there. We are using the mental laws correctly so that we can influence our environment as greatly as possible to get the outcome that we'd like. Page 270. We're just moving right through this chapter. It's a thrilling chapter, actually. He says, the criterion for anyone as to what is right or wrong for that person is not to be found in some other person's judgment. The criterion is, does the thing I wish to do express more life, more happiness, more peace to myself, and at the same time harm no one? If it does, it is right. If not, it is selfish. Oh no, it is not selfish if we do it that rightly. But if it is done at the expense of anyone, then in such a degree we are making a wrong use of the law. He says, he has a couple paragraphs next, which I think is important, because when we talk about principles of success, oftentimes what we think of as success is that kind of modern American view of success, which is to have more money, have more fame, have more cars, have more this, have more that, have a bigger house. Oh, my house has 8 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms. Well, my next one's going to have 12 bedrooms and 19 bathrooms. And I'm going to have thrones in every room, et cetera, et cetera. And he says something great. Also too, I was watching one of those like American Idol shows, and they interviewed the person. They said, why do you think that you deserve to be the American Idol? And the person said, I think it was American Idol. It might've been The Voice or one of them. They all kind of run them together in my mind sometimes. But they said, I deserve to be the American Idol because I've always wanted to be famous. That is an American or Western, let's say Western view of success. Ernest Holmes, though, says this, and he says, man, I'll try to degenderize this. He says, one does not exist for the purpose of making an impression upon his environment. Let me just read that again. One does not exist for the purpose of making an impression upon his environment. This person does exist to express themselves in and through their environment. There is a great difference. We do not exist to leave a lasting impression upon our environment, not at all. And then I highlighted this next part. It is not necessary that we leave any impression. It is not necessary if we should pass on tonight, meaning if we died today, that anyone should remember that we ever have lived. All that means anything is that while we live, capital letters, we live. And wherever we go from here, we shall keep on living. Boy, that is so wild. Because how many times do you hear people say, I want to make an impression upon this world. I want to change the world. I want to live in a way that others see who I am. And he's saying, that's not necessary. What is necessary is that you see who you are and that you live that you fully in your environment. Whether people remember you after all, thank you, Evelyn, that's an amen. Whether people remember you after you die, he says is not the point. It's if you remember who you are, why you are here. Woo, that's a Buddhist concept. That is so profound. And it's so awesome. I remember years ago watching a bunch of Buddhist monks came to a museum and they did sand mandalas on the floor. Beautiful, giant sand mandala, like in a museum, the museum lobby or something. And they spent hours creating a sand mandala. Fascinating. And when they were done, they didn't stand around and bow to applause. They didn't take pictures for posterity. They didn't take congratulations or hope that people would put it on their Facebook. They didn't do any of those things. You know what they did? They took their broom and they swept it up. It was temporary. It was in the moment. Our lives are in the moment. We are beautiful mandalas of life. And Ernest Holmes says, don't worry what happens after. And he says, it's quite a burden lifted when we realize we do not have to move the world. It is going to move anyway. This realization does not lessen our duty or our social obligation. It clarifies it. Now, let me say this. It's so great to know when he says it's quite a burden lifted when we realize we do not have to move the world. Part of this too is that understanding that the idea of wanting to move the world anyway, it comes from our ego, not our soul. Not completely, not always, but often. It's an ego thing to want to do that. I love that. That just makes this book so deep and so rich and so wonderful. let's just move forward. Page 272, he says, we do not have to make the law work. It is its nature to work. So that means that we don't have to push it, control it, tell it what to do. We don't have to say, this is what we want, and I want it in this format, and I want it at this time in exactly this way. I'd like you to mail the check to me, and I'd like the check to be on blue stock, and I'd like it to be exactly in one payment, not four. I'd like it to arrive on June 8th, not June 9th, et cetera, et cetera. We want to push the law and we want to control it. And he says, you don't have to do that. Just relax, relax into it. Be part of it. He says, our part is to be ready and willing to be guided into truth and liberty. Wow. Guided into truth and liberty. He says, our correct choice will be part of the working of the law. All doubt and fear must go, and in their place must come faith and confidence, for we shall be led by the Spirit into all good. People often say, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make a choice. I have heard that so many times, especially in classes that I teach, when we talk about wanting what we want in life, and say, I don't know. By the act of continually saying, I don't know what I want, literally means that you don't know what you want. You create more of not knowing the thing that it is you want. But he says, we must realize that there's an intelligence within us that does know. This guidance is true for all people. So he said that law points the way, but we have to take the action. And we have to allow ourselves to be guided and directed every step of the way and go with it. Relax, don't try to control it, and be guided and directed. On page 273 at the bottom, he says, St. Paul said, we have the mind of Christ, which means that each one of us has immediate access to the intelligence of the universe. We give intelligence outlet in two ways, by pure inspiration or intuition, or the more common way of bitter experience. So what he means with this is, we have the mind of Christ means that we are created by the same power that created Jesus Christ. So the Christ mind in Jesus is the Christ mind that is in us, and we have access to it at all times. And we can access that intelligence through inspiration, and when we get those nudges, those impulses, we can follow them. Or he says through bitter experience, which means basically trial and error. This worked, this didn't work. This worked, this didn't work. Instead of letting go and letting it all happen. The next page, 274, is about treatment. So you can go back to those talks on treatment to get the refresher, because that's what that page is about. But then he goes into one of the most famous little sections of the Science of Mind on 275. He says, my treatment then must not consider the facts. The facts are relative. The treatment must become absolute. I wish to get it over into mind as a complete acceptance, not of the old fact, but of the new one, which means we must move out of that lower level, the dualistic thinking, the right or wrong, the petitioning, all of those things that we've learned in our life, all of the things that hold us back, all of the doubts and fears and everything. We must move all of the reasons why something can't happen aside and realize that spirit is now our truth. Spirit is now our guide, and spirit is the absolute of what we are talking about here. And in that paragraph is one of the most famous lines of the entire book. He says, principle is not bound by precedent. Principle is not bound by precedent means that just because something has not happened before doesn't mean it can't. And also, when things happen in the world and we think, oh, well, this is an exception to the oneness that we teach, there is no exception to it. Let me just keep marching forward. Page, I'm going to move all the way to the last page of the chapter. Page 278. where he says a good demonstration, this is the last paragraph, a good demonstration is made when truth, gathering its own power, lifts one out of their environment. And until that time comes, they should stay where they are in order that they may know when they have made a demonstration. All right. So in The Science of Getting Rich, Wallace Wattles says you cannot go to the next level until you completely complete the level you are in. If there is something left unfinished, Wallace Wattles says, you have to finish it before you go to the next level, like a video game. You don't go to level 42 till you complete level 41. Ernest Holmes is saying something similar here in a sense where he says, we have to realize the demonstration that we are looking for before we can go forward, and that will be lifted up, that will lift us up out of our environment. So that's the chapter in a nutshell. Let me just close and finish up by telling you what I think the chapter ultimately means for us, okay? That was a quick Science of Mind tour. But here's really what I think this all means. All of us ultimately want something for nothing. Let's just acknowledge that. We all would like to do as little as possible to get as much as possible. That's our human nature. Give me, gimme, gimme. But the spiritual path is all about one thing, which is the realization of who we truly are. Not about what we can get, but who we truly are. It's like all of our journeys are summed up in that great hymn when it says, I once was lost, I now am found. What that means is I once was asleep, I am now awake. I once was small, I now am limitless. I once believed that I could be harmed, but now I know there is only good in this universe. Here's the true key of this chapter. On page 275, he quotes the Bible and he says, as we've proven, principle is not bound by precedent. We go into that realm which says, behold, I make all things new. The spiritual path is not to just get more, it's to become new again. You can't put old wine into new wineskins. I never knew what that was about for all those years I heard it in the Christian church. And I'd hear that quoted over and over, and I never knew what it was about till I read that. What that meant was that if you tried to put new wine, they used to hold wine in wineskins. And if you tried to put the new wine that was freshly made into an old wineskin, the new wine expands and it would burst the wineskin. Trying to get something for nothing means we're going to try to put new wine into old wineskin. When he says on page 266 that we cannot get something for nothing, this is what he means. That success ultimately is not about getting what you want. The principles of success are about becoming who you were meant to be. In the book Testimony of Light, when the woman that is talking from the other side of the veil says, when you die, you're shown your life in two ways, the way you lived it and the way it could have been. And when you see the way it could have been, it's not that you got more stuff, that you got yet another degree, that you got a car, that you got anything. It's always about, did you fulfill the purpose and promise of your life? The thing that made your heart sing, giving to the people that you love. Did you do that as much as you possibly could? And to close this talk, I'm going to go to the most cliche thing ever. No, it's not the little hand. It's the most cliche thing, the metaphor of all. And yet it is so apropos of this chapter. It's the caterpillar and the butterfly. The caterpillar is our ego self, the smaller self, this part that is asleep that doesn't yet realize that what we want lies on the other side of the cocoon. Instead of just trying to find a nicer leaf that we can munch and get a little bit out of the shade, hey, that's comfortable. Instead, the spiritual path would have us cocoon ourselves in the truth, cocoon ourselves so that we are constantly wrapped in this spiritual highness, the mystical truth, the divine oneness that is life. And that as we continue to wrap ourselves in it and wrap ourselves in it and wrap ourselves in it, we alchemically change spiritually so that when we emerge from that, we are, behold, we are made new. That is the principle of success that Ernest Holmes is talking about. And that's why he begins by saying, this isn't, guys, this isn't about just getting things of what you want. We don't promise that, and we don't even teach that. What we teach is that if you use these principles, you will be made new. And that is where we'll end this and say, and so it is. Moving into just a treatment so we can be that. Let's let ourselves just sink into that truth, that there is no law that we have to impress. There is no push. There's no shove. There's nothing we have to strive for. We don't have to get anything. In Science of Mind, we teach we already have everything. But our job is to awaken it, to awaken to it, and awaken it within us. So we do that right now. It's so effortless to just sink into the truth of oneness and know that God is all there is, this life, this goodness. As Ernest Holmes says, thy will be done means that all of God's good is done. And I'm one with it, you're one with it. We are each one with that truth. And we just move into the realization of knowing that, oh, that good will be done in our life in every possible way. And we don't need to force it, we don't need to make it, and we don't even need to control it. We just need to believe it and let it be our guide. So when, as he says in this chapter, when life prompts you, when the law nudges you, we follow. We allow ourselves to be grown and expanded into consciousness. We, like the caterpillar, we wrap ourselves in spiritual truth so that we alchemically every day emerge brand new and ready to live life to its absolute fullest. For this, I'm grateful. And for this, I release into love and law, and I know it's true for myself and everyone listening to these words. And together we say, and so it is.